Welcome to Ln space where sigma dx over dt applies when t equals 1 equals 0. Where energy is infinite, limitless in flux yet remains the same trans-dimensional, constant and abundant. We summarize this as Brill, behold, the light.
Hi, I've been shooting black powder rifles for a while now, and I do so because it's relaxing and it's cheap. When I go to the range these days and I see people with center fire rifles, and especially when they've got semi-automatics and it's bang, 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 bang. When boxes of ammo are, you know, hitting $25 and $30 a box, that's pretty expensive. You know, you pay your range fee and then you burn a hole in your pocket. With the black powder, on the other hand, I'm shooting, what, 10 shots in the hour maybe? And so I'm there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours at the range, and I'm shooting, you know, 20, 25 shots. The procedure for a black powder, of course, you have to put the powder in, you have to then put the patch and ball or the bullet, the projectile, you have to put that in, you have to ram it down with the ramrod, then you have to put the cap up on the nipple, and then cock the hammer, and you shoot. In the 1980s, a company called Thompson Center made a gun, and it was called the Hawken. And these guns are already rising in value. They were a fantastic gun that you could buy over the counter at a gun store. Nothing special, you know, you weren't getting green mountain barrel, you weren't getting all of these special things, but it was fairly cheap and it shot really well. This particular model is a 50 caliber. I load it with 70 grains of powder, 50 caliber, so it's a 50-70, and I shoot in the bullseye all the time with this. And one of the reasons is because of a neat little thing. And if you look, well, if I can get this right, if you look in the trigger guard, you're going to see 2 triggers in there. Okay, a front trigger and a rear trigger, and that's called the set trigger. And what you do is you cock the hammer, and with the gun on your shoulder, okay, you pull on the rear trigger and you set it. Now you have a hair trigger. And I'm going to demonstrate that further with a trigger pull gauge and a good piece of paper, cloth, something to stop the hammer from actually striking the nipple and deforming it. Now, I have cocked it, and I have not set the trigger. So I'm going to measure the trigger pull. Okay, now the trigger pull on that is 11 pounds. That's an 11-pound trigger pull without a set trigger. I'm going to do that again, but set the trigger. Now the trigger is set. And I'll reset the trigger pull gauge, and I will pull the trigger. There we go. And that's 1.5 pounds. The difference is with this set trigger setup is the difference between a 4-inch group and a cutting clover leaves. The main purpose of this video is about this antique rifle that I have. Okay, and this antique was made in 1873. It's called a Trapdoor Springfield. The trigger pull on this, okay, and I will measure it right now, and then I'll explain why. So the trigger pull on this, and I've reset that, is 11 pounds. Now that's about the same as the Hawken without a set trigger. And the reason that the triggers were heavy like this are a twofold reason. One is that you have fixed a bayonet on the end here, and so you bayonet somebody and then you'd slam the gun butt on them. And if you're running along in battle and your buddy fellow infantryman was running beside you, you might not have this here at all times, especially if you've just done this to somebody. You might have it here pointing right at him. And if you had a hair trigger on this, you might kill him. So they made the triggers deliberate, meaning that you meant it to go off to pull this trigger at 11 pounds. The other thing is that back in those days, the 1800s, we didn't have conveniences like we do today. Everything was manual labor. So it was a harder time, and the result was the tendon strength in people's arms was a lot stronger than it is today. And so you take people with that tendon strength and a trigger that's heavy like this, and it was no problem for them to shoot that gun. I am annoyed when I'm shooting this gun and the closest I can get is about 3 inches. A guy called Ernie Brandt designed a new trigger tumbler, and the trigger tumbler is adjustable to give you the hair trigger. And in the Hawken rifle, if you can think of the sear as being my fingers here, okay, this is going to be connected to the hammer, okay, and so this is the trigger. And so what happens is that when I pull back on the trigger, the sear comes to this position here. And then it drags all the way along here, long creepy trigger pull, and then release. Okay? And that was the 11 pounds that you saw. On the set trigger, when I set it, it pushes this over right to the very edge. So what Ernie did was he took a tumbler, and when you go to the full cock position, it's sitting on an adjustable sear. And so you don't have a long trigger pull. And we'll just go and look at that now. Let's just look at this trigger. Okay, and as you can see, I've got the pressure here that the spring would put on the sear. And I'm just opening, there's the point of let off. And you'll see that at the point of let off, okay, a gap between the sear and the tumbler has developed, which is about maybe a 32nd of an inch. And from touching and coming out to letting off, that 32nd of an inch is your long creepy trigger pull. Now in the Hawken trigger, how it works is when I set the trigger, it will move this out to the very edge, like that. Move it out to the very edge. Then, when I hit the main trigger, bang, it goes. A man called Ernie Brandt, he developed a pretty neat little deal. It's a replacement for the sear tumbler. Okay, a replacement. But what he did on the fire position here, he took that away and he put in a little tiny grub screw. Okay, you can see it's drilled in the back here. Okay, and that little tiny grub screw is now the position that the sear will ride on. So when I put this back together here, okay, there's your hammer down position, okay, And there's your hammer down position, your half cock position, and now you bring her around, and there she's sitting on the lip, on the edge of the grub screw. Now, by turning that grub screw in or out, I can effectively make this a hairier and hairier trigger, or a safer and safer trigger. If I bring the grub screw out this way, I provide more of a sear surface. If I retract it back into the tumbler, it becomes a hair trigger. So what happens is, boom. Okay, and just see how it just so easily, quickly lets off. And that in a way is a sort of a milestone in trapdoor trigger technology. From externally, you cannot tell that the gun has been altered. Okay, and internally, when I go to shoot this gun, okay, I have the rest position. Then I have the half cock position, and that's the position that I'm in for loading, opening the trapdoor and loading it. And then when it's up on my shoulder, I pull it around to the firing position, which is the set position. Now, boom, and it goes off. Now that we have that fitted in the rifle, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have her at this position. Okay, that's the first notch. That's the second notch. And this is the notch normally where you would open the trapdoor and you would load the rifle. Then this is the adjustable sear position, right there. And that's a hair trigger. And the warning that I had when I got that came with this adjustable trigger tumbler was, it's dangerous. And just like the Hawken, okay, you have it up at that second cock position, put it up on your shoulder, aim it downrange, and then to that position. Aim at the target, keeping your finger off the trigger. And when you're on the target, then you can put your finger on the trigger and release the hammer and let the bullet go. So, she's in the danger position of the hair trigger, and I've just adjusted this. Okay. And what we have here basically is 6 pounds. Okay? So 6 pounds from let off. This trigger has taken 5 pounds out of the equation. It's not a 1 pound trigger, but it doesn't have trigger creep. Okay? As you saw before when I showed you the sear together, it had a lot of trigger creep. Okay, so it doesn't have the trigger creep. It's 6 pounds, bang! As soon as you hit that 6 pounds, there's no creep. There's just, it lets. So already I know that this gun's become more accurate. I'm going to take it down the range and test it, but right now, for the money that it cost for the Ernie Brandt trigger conversion, I'll tell you what, I think it's worth every penny, because I can certainly deal with a 6 pound trigger pull rather than an 11 pound trigger pull. Now, another thing I'm going to show you is that the collector who, before he passed away, he sold me this rifle. and this was one in his collection, and the serial number on the base of it is a West Point serial number, and everything is, it's not a Bannerman special, it's the real deal. Anyways, he told me that the West Point way to load these rifles is different from how I've been seeing people on the internet who get a hold of these rifles and take them out, and they shoot them, their daughters shoot them, their friends shoot them, and they all do the same thing. They shoot the rifle, they bring the hammer back, and then they tilt the rifle up for some reason, and they open the lock and eject the cartridge, and look what happens. That falls back. Now it's in the way, and they don't know what to do with it, and they've got the next bullet, and they're trying to put the bullet in and try and negotiate this thing. West Point way was you fired the gun and you dropped it down. And I'll show you what happens. This round does not have a primer in the base, so it's a dummy. So I'll show you right now. Okay, bang, you've shot the round. Okay, you don't mess with it tilting it up, you tilt it down. Okay, with it tilted down, the round falls on your toes. It's down, this by gravity is forward, you put the next round in, you close it, now you shoot it. Just that simple. And the last West Point grad who was probably taught with the Springfield how to shoot it by an enthusiastic drill sergeant was probably somewhere in the 1890s, you know, late 1880s, 1890s. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video of trying to make my Trapdoor Springfield 4570 more accurate by doing something about that awful trigger. I didn't mention during the video that when I measured the sear on the Tumbler as originally fitted in this rifle, it was a positive camber, and that means that as I disengaged the sear, it tended to push the tumbler around against the spring pressure, and so that added to the weight of the trigger pull. With the Ernie Brandt system, of course, being a hairpin trigger now, and a neutral camber, that is what reduced a lot of the weight of the trigger pull, and now being a hair trigger, there's hardly any movement to the trigger and it releases. So it's off to the range now, and let's see if I can't outshoot my Hawken rifle with my antique trapdoor. Thanks very much, and be sure to subscribe to my channel. Okay, bye now.